I like how a panda is just introduced and there is no context or information given about why this individual is a freaking panda. I thought it was random when I saw him in the opening song and that could not be beat, but I was dead wrong. Just seeing the man's introduction in this episode is absolutely hilarious because the voice actor, if I'm correct, I think the voice actor is Daru from Steins Gate. If I'm wrong, correct me in the comments below. But regardless, the point is the way he's introduced, and there's literally just like the characters just go along with it. Like our cast of characters just like, oh, it's a panda, okay, he's talking, that's fine. But there is just no context. I'm just like, really? Like, I mean, it's fine. It's very clear that the character's probably going to be very important later on. There's probably a secret, something that's going to be probably rather ridiculous as the story progresses. But regardless, if he isn't ridiculous and something crazy, I'm still excited just to see a panda because it's just so outlandish, it's hilarious, and I don't know, somehow it really does mesh well with, Jujutsu Kaisen. But anyways, let's actually talk about what really happened within this episode, and that is very obvious that Yuji was going to come back in some shape or form. I mean, I have definitely seen this formula before, and it's definitely not uncharacteristic of Shonen Jump maybe to do something like this. However, the thing is, it's just, I didn't really believe Yuji was going to die, because he has Sukuna in him, and everything that we found out from the previous episodes is that if Yuji dies, parts of Sukuna dies with him. So obviously, Sukuna doesn't want to die. He doesn't want to lose like 3 of his fingers all in one go. That would be very bad for the man. So it's very clear that, that was not going to happen. Yuji wasn't going to actually die. However, I will definitely give this episode, the people that worked on this episode, points and props to just how they built up that tension if Yuji was really dead or not. Like, listen, when he actually did, in fact, let's say, die, when we saw him hit the floor and all that, and we had, like, a little bit of a fast forward, they were in the morgue, and you saw Yuji on the table, I was just like, okay, is he gonna come back? Like, this is the point, they're having a conversation, he's gonna regenerate right there, he's gonna come back, and there's gonna be a huge secret that pops up. But it didn't happen. You see this, like, gothic doctor come in that obviously hasn't slept in a very long time because of the bags under her eyes. She walks in, and she's like, oh, I can do whatever I want to him, right? I can experiment on him, and we're left with that scene. And then we continue on throughout the second half of the episode, just the characters talking about what's coming next. A tournament arc is about to happen. We got all this stuff going on, and then we got the ending credit scene where Yuji actually is coming back. And I feel like just the way this episode kind of builds up, it was done in such a way that it was rather tasteful, because, like, there is a lot of series I've seen over the years that will have a character that obviously looks like they're dead, but they come back, and they kind of ruin the build-up of that. Even if, okay, hypothetically, we all knew Yuji was going to be fine, it still doesn't mean that you shouldn't do proper build-up and setup for the return, and that's kind of what did happen within this episode. There was proper build-up and setup, there was tension behind it. Even if I did want to believe in the back of my head that he's probably alive, I was honestly on the tipping point of saying, man, he might actually be dead when, before the ending part of this episode started to play. So I will give props to this episode. It did a good job. It did its job right with making me think Yuji died, but he did not. And this is coming from a guy that's kind of seen this entire twist so many times over. So just this anime is definitely doing a lot of things right, just for that alone. That is a really huge moment just to show how this series can execute cliches that you saw coming. Because as I always say, doesn't matter if it's cliche, it just matters to execution, and this was executed perfectly, in my personal opinion. So anyways, big thing I want to talk about now, though, is the fact that Yuji, with his apparent death and been coming back, we get to see some more weaknesses of him being able to have Sukuna inside of him. Notice the fact that Sukuna is able to literally rip out Yuji's heart and hold him hostage. And this is actually something I really haven't seen much, actually. I haven't seen it much on this demographic of manga, to where let's say the entity or the demon inside of the person will literally take the person hostage that they're in, for instance, like the MC, and like hold their heart and even potentially have their selves at risk too, where they could potentially die. I was very shocked with that entire revelation, and seeing how, Sukuna was doing that, I'm like, this puts Yuji at a very scary point in the story, because he can't rely on Sukuna to deal with his problems, which is very obvious from the previous episode, but this kind of extends upon that if Yuji turns into Sukuna and he lets Sukuna have, you know, control run rampant. Sukuna can easily slaughter Yuji's friends, or on, you know, vice versa, he could put his own self at risk to where he'll, like, pull out his heart, and he's like, hey, if you come back, you're dead. But we get to see clearly that Yuji accepted death in the middle of the episode. He did straight up accept death, and in that moment, I think when he said, live a long life, he probably felt like he was actually going to die. I really think that when Yuji made that declaration, we got to see his final moments, and he basically had no regrets. I guess the only regret he saw was that he didn't get to actually help them out and be with them, but he still seemed like he passed on very peacefully. At least he felt like he was, you know, passing on very peacefully. So we got to see kind of Yuji's, you know, perspective on death itself. It kind of extends upon the character development he got in the previous episode, and I do appreciate this. It's a really nice way to show closure to him if he was in fact to die, and that, you know, he's willing to accept fate and die if it must be that way, and you can see that. And I do like this episode for handling these type of themes so very early on, you know, kind of slapping these hardships in these characters' faces and having to overcome them very quickly. For instance, seeing how they instantly came up against such a high-class opponent, like a special grade opponent, that might not have been fully on intelligent, but coming up against a strong opponent that just decimated him like nothing, makes them all realize just they're nothing. They're really nothing in the grand scheme of things, and that they need to get a lot stronger. This is the typical build-up you would see of a shonen manga, but it's still very relevant. It allows growth of characters, allows them to realize their weaknesses and improve upon them, and it's very clear that Megumi in particular is definitely going to get a lot of growth and development because of just the brief little flashbacks we got within this episode, but also finding out more about his motivation, and also, you know, using, like, you know, shadows as his techniques for, you know, jujutsu sorcery. There's a lot of setup for him to grow as a person, but not just that, it's also Yuji as well. Yuji needs to work on being able to balance and control Sukuna, but also being able to use his own abilities and skills without the use of Sukuna as well, because if he has to, you know, transform into him, it's gonna be a really bad time for him. Which, by the way, speaking of transforming into Sukuna, there was a pact that was mentioned within this episode. Sukuna himself even mentioned that Yuji, you know, has the nerve to use him like he does without forming a pact, and it got him really upset. It does make me wonder if the story does progress, if, you know, Yuji will make a pact with Sukuna in some shape or form. That'd be very cool. I would really think that'd be a cool idea to kind of expand upon what he just said, because it's very clear that Sukuna knows a lot. He knows a lot about the world. I mean, he's been around for over 1,000 years, so he definitely would know. He knows about techniques, you know, jujutsu sorcery techniques. He knows about everything. He's able to analyze situations, understand both sides, and I feel like seeing that he set a pact is definitely going to be really relevant later on. Maybe not for just Yuji, but for other characters in the series to get rather, you know, a lot stronger. Maybe they can make a pact with, you know, some form of curses to get stronger, which I think is probably what's going on with that dude towards the end of the episode. He might have, you know, start to make pacts with demons and stuff, and that's why, you know, he's talking about, like, the curses. I feel like he's probably doing that as well, which is why he has such a relationship with them. So anyways, let's actually get right into it. Let's talk about Sukuna's personality and what he did. It really seemed like Sukuna, in the grand scheme of things, it seemed like he was really just trying to mess with Yuji. It's like at first he realized that, you know, Yuji might not come back, but then he came to a realization that Yuji would probably come back eventually and take control over the body again, but he knows it's only a matter of time until he fully gains control, because it seems like Yuji is slowly waning in power to holding back the curse that is inside of him, and so he's like, he's biding and waiting his time, but he's just making Yuji's life very miserable. But at the same time, it seemed like he was really fascinated by just seeing Megumi's fighting technique. He's like, huh, he's not using a generic technique to summon these things, he's using his shadow. And when he starts to wonder, like, wow, so why did you run away against the special grade when you have something like this? Such a waste of talent, which does make me wonder what he meant. I mean, for Sukuna to actually praise Megumi like he does, it does mean that Megumi must have some form of talent he's completely unaware of, something that really goes above and beyond what maybe would be a normal means of what a jujutsu sorcerer is capable of. So I'm excited to see where that development is going to go. Which, by the way, another thing I do want to mention too, on some more of the lighthearted stuff, I do like seeing Nobara as a Smash fan. That's pretty funny to me. She literally said she's a Smash fan. If she, like, plays it on the Wii or whatever, she'll decimate and destroy people. I think that's really cool. I do like that, those little nods to, you know, pop culture and, you know, gaming and stuff, because, I mean, Smash is, you know, an incredibly popular game. We all know this. It's incredibly popular. her. I mean, just recently we had the whole ordeal with Steve and all that. So, I mean, it's very clear that, I mean, Nobara would probably have, or some characters, not Nobara, but some characters have references maybe to Smash just because of how popular it is in Japan. So, seeing Nobara do it, it's just like, yep, she's a gamer, which just concretes her more as best girl of the story. I love her so much. But anyways, getting back into the main stuff, I want to talk about Gojo for a second. So Gojo, he had a really interesting emotional moment. He literally said that because of what the higher-ups did and how they kind of manipulated events for Yuji to potentially die, he was probably going to take his emotional anger out on the higher-ups and just get rid of all of them, kill them all right then and there. Which is really telling that, you know, these higher-ups really are very manipulative, and they'll do things to really just get what they want, to go behind people's backs and scheme, etc. And I feel like before everything is said and done, it's going to be then that might turn out to be some form of bad guys or something, because it seems like they're really corrupt in their own way, doing what they did, and trying to get rid of just innocent jujutsu sorcerers, because from everything that's already been stated from the previous episodes, is that there's not a whole lot of jujutsu sorcerers. There's not a lot at all. Like, there's barely any, and, you know, they get what they need, and, you know, there's constantly people being spread out, you know, and taking on tasks are a lot harder than what they normally should be able to handle, but they do it anyways because there's barely any of them. And seeing how the higher-ups are willing to just throw all these newcomers under the bus like they are, it is very telling that they don't really care about the prosperity or the long life of jujutsu sorcerers. They're caring more about just the immediate effect right then and now. They're not thinking about long-term, they're thinking about short-term. And I really do think that these old people are going to turn out to be some form of bad guys as the story progresses. It's just very clear to me because of what we saw from this arc. But anyways, we're getting into a tournament arc, which is to be expected. As I've already said, that when it comes to these type of stories, you're going to have cliches here. And a tournament arc is a norm when it comes to these type of series. Doesn't mean it's bad, but it's a way to kind of introduce other characters, show growth of characters, and really introduce the next cast for maybe another major arc of the story. So it's nothing relatively bad. It's something that's really definitely important for an early, you know, series, like something that's first coming out. Like, we gotta remember, Jujutsu Kaisen, at this point in time when it was coming out in the manga, it was trying to survive, you know, the axing spree that Shonen Jump likes to do. It loves getting rid of things left and right, and obviously to kind of build up popularity and people to read it, the writer probably had to do whatever they could to get more audience, and probably resorted to a tournament arc to really introduce a bunch of new characters. It's very organic in a way to kind of introduce, you know, these jujutsu sorcerers like that. So I think that it makes sense for them to do that, but I feel like some might have a problem that we're getting into a tournament arc, which I don't think it's necessarily bad. I actually think it's kind of a good thing. But I want to leave it at that, though. Let me know your thoughts in the comments below. If you enjoy my content, you know, please subscribe. If you like this video, please leave a like. And if you want to get notified whenever I upload a video, please click the bell icon down below. And with that, Chibi out.